Hello and welcome to this month's edition of the Player's Voice, an RPA podcast. I am your host, Ethan Waller, and today we're diving into the intriguing subject of player businesses. I'm delighted to be joined today by Northampton and Leicester player development manager Jamie Bethell and former Harlequins, Saracens and Northampton player Joe Gray, owner of the MyoMaster recovery business. Gents, a warm welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us on the pod. Joe, great to see you and thank you for coming on. How are things?
Yeah, good mate, going really well. So busy, but good. Can't complain.
Saw you were in the England camp doing some throwing stuff. Are you joining them for the rest of this World Cup preparation?
So yeah, I'm in for the preparation. So I'm in a couple of days a week at the minute, doing specialist throwing coaching with the hookers, and then helping out the days I'm in with anything else they need. But it's been really good, really interesting. Good sort of first month. Then I'm helping all the way up to the World Cup when they go off to France. So
amazing. I mean, you've. I think it's safe to say you've had a very well. I mean, we'll get to the nitty-gritty details of it, but from the outside, it seems like you've had a pretty smooth transition into retirement and coming into the sort of quote unquote real world. Has it been as smooth as it seemed from the outside perspective?
I'd say it's been pretty smooth, but I'd say the only reason it's smooth is the preparation I put in pre-retiring. So I was fully aware from a young age. I basically got offered my pro contract at Saints on a Thursday. They were writing up the contract over the weekend, sent it me on Monday, and on the Saturday I had a career-ending injury that could have lost my leg from the knee down, dislocated, did every ligament you could do, meniscus, cartilage, the whole works. Foot was under my armpit, and from that moment I was very aware that you're one tackle away from it all going. So from the early stage, from when I got back sort of 2 years later to playing at Saints, I was really proactive in doing things outside of rugby, just in case anything like that happened again throughout my career, that I was in as good a position as I could be. So I was really proactive to do it. And thankfully it transitioned nicely out with an opportunity that came up in the coaching world for me to sort of step into alongside my business as well. So
amazing. It's almost like you knew exactly the route I was going to go down with the preparation stuff, which is brilliant because we're going to come on to that we're going to come on to that a little bit later in some more detail. But Jamie, just when you see someone who has, as Joe said there, he's prepped himself from more or less the word go. I mean, for you as a player development manager, that makes life unbelievably easy. But I suppose having someone like Joe as an example to show younger players, just how important is that and how helpful is that for you?
Yeah, it's really important. You see the lads in the club, the lads can physically see and talk to as an example of kind of getting it done whilst they're still delivering on the pitch. And I think over recent years as well, you've seen that the lads who have got things going outside of rugby are usually up there with the good, really good performers as well. So I think them seeing that in real life is so much more powerful than me pecking the head about it whilst they're eating lunch, which is what you normally see me doing day to day. And also just to drop little nuggets of wisdom here and there, rather than a kind of a sit down, which we can do in a more kind of formal setting, but just little questions that might come up, which I know is super powerful at clubs. Especially where players feel like they've got the environment where they're happy talking about what they've going on outside of rugby, and just encouraging lads and making it a lot more normal and accessible is really good, especially when it's lads that people look up to.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a shift, because I remember at the start of my career, and I imagine it's probably pretty similar at the start of yours, Joe, that it was almost frowned upon is probably the wrong phrase, but it definitely wasn't seen as much of a priority as it is now. And I think it's a massively positive change that we're now entering a space where that active development is encouraged. But I remember at the start of my career, when I started doing my uni degree alongside rugby, I was almost not encouraged, but I was, given a little tap on the shoulder saying you might want to just keep that one under wraps, just because if they think you're not concentrating on rugby when you're in those academy years, they always get a bit funny about it. But now, like we say, luckily that dynamic has hugely shifted, and the likes of Saracens probably paved the way on that in how important they saw development and putting in those development days. But we can come to that a little bit later. But we'll jump in, Joe, because I'm desperate to talk about MyoMaster, because I've kept up with the journey from a distance anyway, from when you started. But the beginning to the story, I think, is brilliant, and I think has become one of the talking points as to I don't know, maybe it was a big help as to how it grew. But for those those are the listeners that don't know about the story. Give us it from the start.
Yeah, so basically, I've had a lot of injuries. I obviously started talking about a major one early on, but I've had 15 operations today, a lot of time on the sideline, and I was injured again. I'd actually had a Bennett's fracture on my thumb, so I was out doing loads of running, and I got Achilles tendonitis while I was running. I'd actually, through the RPA, finished a carpentry on-site course. I've done 2 years of carpentry training to be able to fit out my house, and if I wanted to go into property and things. So I was actually fitting my kitchen at the time. I'd had a treatment called shockwave therapy on my Achilles earlier that week, which basically whacks it really hard to numb it and allow you to carry on training. But it was off in London, and I could only get it every 2 weeks. And I was basically didn't want to finish fitting the kitchen because it was taking ages and I was on a hard bit. So I had my jigsaw out and some work, and I was looking at my jigsaw and I was like, it's a very similar process to this whacking mechanism I went and had treatment with. So instead of doing the kitchen, I started dismantling my jigsaw. I welded a stool leg onto like the end. I basically took the connection out where the blade goes in and connected this stool leg, and then used it on my calf and Achilles, and it was like identical to a treatment I just had in 40th in central London. So I was like, I'm a genius. I've absolutely killed this. So I took it into training the next day at Quins. It's bright yellow, like offensively loud, like make ears bleed loud. Went in the changing room, started using it. As you can imagine, rugby changing room, 60 lads, see me pull out a yellow jigsaw, start using it. This was before a massage gun was a thing, so no one had seen it. And I got absolutely abused, as you can imagine, destroyed. I then went out running, and as I'm walking across the pitch, like 200 meters from the changing room, I can hear this in the changing room. And I wander in, and they're all using it on their backs and their legs. And I'm like, Grazer, this is mental. This is unbelievable. So Sinclair pulls some cash out of his wallet, and he was like, Grazer, I'm taking this home. I need it in my life. So he took me a couple £100, and my jigsaw's worth nowhere near that. So I was like, you can have it. That's fine. So on the way home, I picked up another from B&Q, made myself another. By the end of the week, I had like 7 orders from lads, and I was like spray painting them on my table. I was like writing a logo on them and making them up. And then my dad was an engineer, and he was literally like, you're going to get sued for this. He's like, you cannot do this. So he sat down and we discussed like quick release heads in different sizes and developed it. But that was the initial sort of seed of the first product. And it's sort of like wildfire around the club. So I thought there must be a space for this.
Was it literally as quick as that from the day you bought it in, and obviously Six giving you that cash? Was it then in your head you went, right, I can make some cash out of this? Because obviously initially it was just to ease some pain and help you get through training, continue doing rugby, that path that you know you're on. But then as soon as you get thrown a bit of cash, the opportunity came. Was it very much a light bulb moment?
Yeah, it's a bit of a light bulb moment. I was like, wow, if like these are pro athletes that we can get all sorts of different things, and England International's asking me to make them it, I was like, this must be a thing that I could do. So then I started researching manufacturers and looking how much it'd be. And it was at a point where literally I asked the manufacturer around the UK, and it was insanely expensive. It was like 450 quid for them to make massages. And then I was like, well, everyone does it in Asia and China. So then I'd Google Translate my email and then send it at like midnight before I went to bed, and then have to wait till the morning see if anyone's replied. I was trying to find manufacturers, and then basically found a few that would do me a sample. And then my missus is basically like, she was a big wig in the city. She was youngest ever board member. And M&C Saatchi, she's been like right-hand man to a few CEOs in business. And she was like, why would you spend all this time just selling a single massager thing you're making? She was like, I run marathons, I do CrossFit, I get injured all the time, and I don't know anything about recovery. I don't know about cool downs, I don't know about rehab, I don't know about any protocols whatsoever. And you get insight to all of this information on a daily basis that you take for granted. So then we sat down and brainstormed out MyoMaster, and from day one, we wanted it to be the home of sports recovery. So rather than a single product, it had several, and rather than just the product, it had an education in the background that you'd actually learn how to recover properly. So that's when we really sat down and got into the nitty gritty of the business sort of plan and what we want to do. And then even then, it was like probably 6 months, 9 months later till we made our first purchase order, and no manufacturer would make me a massager. So I had to get 500 jigsaws without the blade attachment sent, and then hand make them in the spare room, which is about 20 minutes or so of a massager, which was an absolute ball ache once I actually started doing it. But that was
God.
Yeah.
That's chaos. I mean, it's always something that I've been interested in not necessarily the recovery space side of things. I mean, that is as part of the job, but more just how you get, because I hear lads talk all the time, and I hear a lot of people talk, and they sit and they go, I've got this idea for an invention, I think it's going to be brilliant. It might not be recovery, it might be, I don't know, something to feed lads popcorn while they're sitting watching telly. Regardless, you hear these things and people have these brilliant ideas, but when it comes into actually the manufacturing space, there's not really there's no guides to it. You see people trying to do guides for loads of things, but just how difficult was it to actually find someone who would manufacture all these things for you on such a high scale? Because after that 500 piece order in your spare room, I imagine that was sort of the tipping point where you had to find someone to try and get everything squared away.
Yeah, definitely. I think it also coincided with like the moment in time where massage guns then started to become available and people started to understand what they were. So as I was selling the 500 and they were going, all of a sudden the manufacturers I'd reached out to that would develop it were like, oh, actually, now we might look into what you were doing because there seems to be a market. So then I could send my design, send what I wanted each end to do, and then it became easier to sample. But it is, like you say, there's no guide to doing it, how you find manufacturers, what to do. It was just a trial and error basis. And I've definitely done some purchase orders which came and were not what the sample was. And you have to sort of figure that stuff out along the way. But ultimately, they've got the infrastructure to be exceptionally good at what they do. And we've got a lot of different products with a lot of different manufacturers from Asia to the UK to over in France. So there's a few different areas we now get stuff made. But it was an interesting learning curve, but we've done it now for about 3 years properly. So you sort of get better each time you do it and you understand it more. So.
And obviously now looking at your product list and looking at the website and how well the business has expanded, how long did it take you to comfortably make those expansions? You hear a lot about people sort of making a leap of faith and throwing everything all at the wall at once. Was it a gradual stepping stone for you? Obviously, like you say, you wanted to have that full rehab educational piece, which I think is brilliant to share with the general public who aren't necessarily as aware of that side of things. But in terms of the products, did you decide to start with quite a few, or is it just massage guns and then slowly adding?
So we started with about 4 from day one. So we had compression, massage, EMS. We might have even had occlusion from day one, but we started with 4 products, I remember, and now we've got a suite of about 12. But then what we found was we did a lot of on the ground. So we'd be at races and expos and shows and go and visit clubs and get a lot of feedback all the time. So then whenever people fed back, we'd make a change and make it better, basically, each iteration. Also, we'd get a lot of pushback of be like, this is amazing, but it's a bit out of my price range, or I'd like a bit smaller one from the gym. So then naturally it sort of expanded that instead of one massage gun, we had a larger and a smaller one that just points to actually hit different people. And the same with compression. Some people were like, I do ultras all the time. I'm camping on sites where I'm running around the country, and having a portable one that's battery powered would be awesome if you could. So then we had 2 different models of that. And naturally it sort of had different price range for different consumers, which naturally broaden the scope. And then a lot of it's just feedback from athletes and the general public. So we're getting lots of questions about, can you use your product with massage lotion or muscle balm? So then we decided to make our own to coincide with it. And then we're getting lots of questions, and we're doing lots of blogs and things about cold water immersion. So then we've been looking into that for a while anyway. So we developed our cold water immersion range and things, and naturally it just sort of came out. But definitely from day one, we wanted a larger product range, but it's just gradually built over the last sort of 2-3 years.
That feedback thing, I think, is huge. I see so many companies that have started and failed who have just gone down the route of, we'll just go down social media marketing. That'll be us. We'll be able to square it away on Instagram, Facebook ads, whatever you might be. And whilst that's a hugely powerful tool, like you say, there is nothing more powerful than getting feedback from the people that are doing it, because it's so easy to be in your own sort of world when you're doing these things, because it's your baby. It's something that you've put your heart and soul into. So naturally, you're going to be a bit blinkered on stuff that might be a little bit, not necessarily faulty, but stuff that might not be optimal for a certain group of people who are going to be buying this. So that feedback level is massive. Did you find that you got a lot of that sent to you naturally, or did you go out actively seeking it?
We got just a lot. Again, most weekends, if I was playing Saturday, I'd be at a trade show or race Sunday. A lot of you'd be there Saturday. A lot of it was just generally fed back in them live moments. We did get feedback over email, like, love your product, it'd be great if we could do this. But even like down to the massager, it was like loud as anything, offensively loud. But I was like, no one cares, they're treating themselves and it's fine. But then once you got feedback, they're like, oh, I love it, but I'd love to be able to use it while the kids are in bed. But it sounds like I'm doing building work, so it wakes the kids. Or I like it, but I can't use it in the gym because everyone looks at me because it's so loud. So then now we've got the quietest massage, which is awesome. It doesn't make a noise, but same with our heads. Like people are like, oh, it'd be great if it's like the blade, you get like a Graston. So then we developed a head that's a Graston, and it was all fed back naturally, which is great because, as you say, then it's actually what the consumer wants. And one of our taglines is like created for athletes by athletes. So that's a big one we sort of use.
For the players, by the players.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's awesome that you built it, like you've said, kind of from the ground up, and the focus has been on just creating an outstanding product based on your experience, your feedback, and just kind of a consistent loop, it sounds like, of how can we make this better? Let's go and do it. And it sounds like from how this all started, you're quite a kind of practical problem solver in terms of, and it sounds like, you said your dad was an engineer as well. It sounds like if you were to get some feedback on the product, you've got a good idea of how to go and implement it and improve it. Is the other side of that, was there a stage when you thought, you know what, I've got a really good product, really confident in that here, but perhaps the sales and the marketing and the kind of other aspect of it is something to work on? Or is that where you said your wife Lottie kind of comes into that?
Yeah, so that's definitely where Lottie comes into it. I'm 100% product based. So I 100% believe we wouldn't launch a product unless I believe it's the best in its class, and I believe that on all of it. And an example is our muscle and joint balm. There's loads of muscle and joint balms out there. We could have white labeled it. We worked with scientists to formulate it. It took 49 iterations, and I didn't do it until everybody thought it was like basically like putting deep heat on you, but totally natural and like unbelievable. And it took me ages to do that. It was over a year. But I'm one of the people that, like, if we're going to do it, I don't just want to jump on something. I want it to be really good and the feedback be really good. Lottie is incredible. She was like head of marketing at companies and stuff. So she understands brand and how to build a story, and then how we're going to scale and the actual business side, but also like what no one tells you about a startup life and starting your own business, that you have to literally wear about 8 different hats and figure it out along the way, and you just learn. And what's really good is that me and Lottie are both really hard working, which underpins everything in business, in professional sport. It's like if you're hard working, you can figure stuff out. And there were points in the early days where we're in the website uploading, creating our webpage. We've never done that in our lives. We're then doing Facebook ads. We've never done that in our lives. And you're YouTube and figuring it out along the way. And now we're a bit bigger. We have people in our team that specialize in them areas, but a lot of it was just figuring it out along the way. But Lottie was definitely the business side and growing the brand, and I was definitely the product side. But I think they came together really nicely when you have a very good product, you have someone who understands the brand, and then you can merge it.
Yeah, it sounds like an unbelievable match, to be honest, Joe. How did you actually manage that from a kind of relationship level? Because it sounds like Lottie's got a lot going on professionally. You're obviously, hard-working professional athlete at the time. And if you start up a business together at home, then it might not leave a lot of time left for personal time. Is that something you spoke about up front, or is that another jump in and let's work it out as we go?
It was a bit of jumping and let work it out. And then also right in the mix, Lottie got pregnant and we had a baby right at the start. So that was another little spanner in the works, which was...
that wasn't in the business plan.
Yeah, it wasn't in the business plan. We definitely spoke about kids, but then the business came and she fell pregnant at the same sort of time. So it was like all happening at once. And we're like, oh, wow. But what actually happened was Lottie's a machine. So 3 weeks post-birth, she's in the office working with Otis, our little boy. Like, she's an absolute machine. So she was just cracking on. And in terms of relationship side, I've heard loads of people be like, how do you do it with your wife? Like, that is ridiculous. But I actually couldn't imagine not doing it with her, because days you're stressed, or days you have a massive pitch, or there's a great opportunity, you're stressed and excited together. So rather than one of you, she'd ring me and be like, I've got to stay late tonight, I'm staying till midnight to get this done for tomorrow. I totally understand that, because I'm like, it's a huge opportunity tomorrow. If I wasn't, I'd be like, just come home. What are you doing? Like, why would you waste time? Why wouldn't you come here and be with me? But I think you have the highs and the lows together. There's been loads of highs, loads of lows, but you can actually manage it together really well. And ultimately with our little boy as well, we've just brought him along for the ride. So we've had him at trade shows, races. He's running around with the kids. We've had him along the whole time, joining in. So it's been a full family sort of effort. But it's an interesting one in terms of relationship. We do find ourselves now talking about it all the time. So even on a date night, we're talking about how good this was, or what we could do to improve. So we definitely have to manage that a bit and be like, okay, we're not going to talk about that for the next hour.
That's awesome. Like I say, I speak to a few players, and that's something I think, and I don't know if this is just human nature or if it's something that is a bit more amplified in players, but it seems that a lot of lads start businesses with, other people. With that's like you and your brother Beef, or, you think of Josh and Brad with Social, or the Matabasi brothers, and a few others with businesses that are starting up kind of this year. Had you considered before starting this that you wanted to go into your own space in terms of starting your own business, and potentially with Lottie, considering the skill set she's got? Or was it all based on this kind of eureka moment, it seems, that then, just kind of went with the flow and put some graft in?
So we definitely spoke about our own business. So we're talking about, I'd spoke about my own business post rugby. So Lottie definitely was going to go in London, aim to be a CEO of a big business, and that was her aim. She always wanted to do that, and she was on a really good trajectory over the sort of 6 years or so she was in the city. She was doing incredibly. I always would have liked to do coaching, but I knew it was a bit of a golden ticket out of rugby. So then I was looking into maybe creating my own coaching camps or different things around that. And I always had a bit of an idea of like, it'd be cool to do your own business, but I don't know what would come along and do that. And then it was a bit of a eureka moment that happened with the jigsaw into a massager. Then Lottie coming in and being like, why don't you do this? You've got all this insight. And if I was doing this, I'd do this. And it's like, I don't have a clue about business. So it just sort of aligned really well. And then we both decided to take the plunge and put our savings in and go for it. And that was sort of the start. And then weirdly, with Otis being born, she obviously had a chunk of 6 months maternity, which really let her get into the business, like basically fully with a newborn, but like she was in and enjoying it and really finding it grow at that point. And I was still playing, but then on evenings and weekends when I wasn't, I was in it. And then it got to the point where Lottie said, I'm going to quit my job in the city and I'll take a low wage here, but we'll grow it and go from there. And we agreed, and that's what she did. And she's been full-time on the business now for 2 years. So
that's awesome. I mean, it sounds like a hell of a journey, and it's really good to hear how it all started. What was your eureka moment, Beef?
For which thing, mate?
You choose.
For the butcher's yard. So I've just opened a barbecue school with a good friend of mine. So do a sort of teaching all the low and slows, the Kamados, the Smoky Mountains, all that kind of stuff. And we were just basically two bigger set lads who just really enjoyed food. He taught me everything I wanted to know about smoking meat. I taught him everything he needed to know about cooking Neapolitan pizzas. And we met in the middle and had a great friendship anyway. And we'd always spoken about doing the occasional event. We did a few pop-ups at my old restaurant in Worcester, just cooking outside over fire. And then he had an opportunity. His butchers, basically, they live on this, where the butcher's located, it's on this plot of land, and they basically had an empty barn just outside. And they said, that's not doing anything. He was in there every single day because he lived around the corner. And he said, well, look, I've got a good friend of mine. We've done some events. We're actually looking to sort of spread the word about live fire and get as many people into it as possible. And they basically they were such good friends, and they went, you can have it for free. Give us a couple of bits of the bookings every now and again. Buy all your meat from us and your produce from the veg barn just next door. And you can we just want to help you grow, and we want to help it all go together. So the ease was probably the light bulb moment for me, Jamie, to be perfectly honest. It was something that just happened to sit perfectly in our laps, and it's an opportunity for us to grow it at our own pace because we're not having to worry about the overheads. We can truly invest in putting out the best classes, getting the best product in, and making sure the message we want to spread and the education we want to give is really the highest quality it can be. And hopefully you saw that yesterday in some capacity. You definitely ate everything, so I'm taking that as a positive.
Yesterday was unbelievable. It was one of the big perks of my job. Working a Sunday was terrible, mate. But no, I thought it was awesome. And I think to people listening to this, it might kind of sound like you got quite lucky there. You know, you've found somewhere that you can have kind of minimal overheads and kind of an opportunity present itself. But knowing you a bit better, I know that's because you put, whether it's deliberate effort or you're just naturally a very personable person, but you put a lot of time into, networking or getting on with people and making the most of any doors that can be opened for you. And you do that for other people as well. Is that something?
I think really. Oh, sorry. No, go on.
I was going to ask, is that something that you have been aware of, because it is something that rugby does offer, I think, is a lot of kind of opportunities to meet new people who potentially can help with things in the future. Is that something you've always thought, I'm going to put some effort into this because it might come back in the future? Or is it something you've just found natural along the way?
It's coincidental, because that's also something I was going to ask Joe, so we can sort of answer this as two, which is perfect. It's like we knew what we were doing. It's a mix of both. I mean, realistically, I never would have met Phil had I not opened two businesses before. So I wouldn't have been able to exchange information with him in the first place with the pizza stuff had I not opened the pizza business with my brother. So that probably, our relationship never would have started there. And then we didn't have an opportunity to really give it a trial of fire, excuse the pun, if I hadn't opened the sandwich shop, because we used that as a base to do our first few events and make sure that we knew what we were doing and that people were interested in the products that was cooked over fire. And more importantly, learning how to do it themselves. So, I mean, they both came from businesses I'd set up, and then they sort of landed into this. But the network you can make in rugby is huge. I mean, you don't realise how you're actually being trained for it. I see lads do moan and sigh when they have to go into the boxes when they're not playing on a match day. And I sit there and I go, lads, you're meeting people who have a lot of money, meaning they are successful in what they do. Just chew their ears off. Half of going out there and chatting to people is figuring out what you don't want to do as much as it is what you do want to do. So just go and have a conversation with them. They are more than willing to help you, because you are, Steve, the Saints player. They are desperate to help you. And that's going to, people will give their time. They'll give you an ear. They'll give you a conversation, or sometimes they'll give you considerably more. But to use that reputation and use that power while you've got it, because once you retire, it's a sad fact, but you're very quickly forgotten in the game once it's out, unless you've done that networking and built that base beforehand. I don't know what your experience has been with it, Joe, if it's been similar.
Yeah, definitely similar. I think what you said is spot on about, we've all been there when you're young in the ACAD, you've got to a box, or you're new to sort of rugby, and you're like, oh God, I don't want to go in there and talk to random people that I don't know. And I used to be exactly that. But then as you understand who you're talking to, like you say, they're successful in their own businesses. And as you say, some of them are very wealthy individuals as well that could be useful for investments down the line or things. But actually, once you just get talking to them and understand how they love rugby, how it's their passion just like it is yours, you actually have a relationship straight away around the thing you're there to do. And then also just they can become amazing connections in the future. So DHL are one of the main sponsors here for all of my business. I've used DHL for delivery of our products, because I met someone from DHL. They gave me a discounted rate because I was a player, and it was just someone I met in a box, but actually helped early days send our products out, which was amazing. But yeah, I'd say it's a huge part, and the network rugby can give you is incredible. So yeah, I agree.
I think as well, like, it's not necessarily just the network from outside. I say outside of the game. It's not just necessarily the fans, the sponsors, but utilising the network of players as well is massive. As we say, people are there to see players. People follow you on social media. People will see you in the street and know who you are. It's just as important to be able to use the players in your club, players in other clubs, and help spread the word about what your business is. And I suppose for yourself, Joe, I imagine you use the Quins boys quite a lot at the start to help promote everything. And then naturally that's then grown throughout the Premiership, because it's a snowball effect once it starts, isn't it?
Definitely. And I have to say, obviously, we're a very privileged and unique situation that one of my close friends is Danny Kerr, one of my best mates is Chris Wobshaw, and they're incredible rugby players, but they're unbelievable blokes. So, all of the people who have helped us with videos and content and images for our website and stuff are just my mates who said, yeah, I'll come for an afternoon at the gym and do a photo shoot. So Danny is a machine, mate. He's done way more than I could have ever asked for. He's chucked it out every time there's a Black Friday sale or something. He comes for another photo shoot. He's unbelievable. Chris Wobshaw's the same. So they're just amazing, and they're just good people. Ultimately, our rugby is full of good people, and we're all happy to help anyone in any way we can. So I've been very lucky that I get to use some unbelievable players like Marcus Smith has came and done photo shoots with us, which helps push the brand and things like that. It's just, they're a great group, as we know, in each team. But and it's also really useful that they're famous and they've got a great social media following. So
Always helpful in that scenario. And I guess you spoke about it briefly before, just at the starting story of MyoMaster, and obviously it was that RPA course that then put you into the carpentry stuff and doing your kitchen, and then boom, MyoMaster's born. It's sort of a butterfly effect, but do you think that this would have happened had the RPA gainline program not been in place?
Yeah, it's a tough one because, as you say, I did my carpentry course through the RPA, and Ben McGregor at the time was my rep, and he was unbelievable. He helped me find the course. He helped me find it for evenings I could do, because most of them were daytimes because they're apprentice style, and I couldn't. Most of them you had to be on site to get certified. He found one with a big warehouse near Epsom that was where I trained up. So it's quite a unique course that he managed to find for me. So that was a huge part of me developing MyoMaster. So I wouldn't have developed it without the broken down jigsaw, and I wouldn't be doing my kitchen had I not done that. So I do think it's a huge point. But even after that, Ben was my rep for basically the whole time, and he was great in terms of just connecting you to people that had done similar, had set up their businesses, and you could sort of bounce ideas off. Or even if you've got your accounts coming up, like have you spoke to blah blah blah, they might have an accountant because they've done their own business in this space. So he's very useful for information and connections. He was great. And as I said, I don't think it would have started purely because of the RPA, but there was definitely another branch that I could have gone into property development and used my carpentry skills to do that post-career, or I did my coaching courses and now I'm coaching in the Champ and in England, but I wouldn't have done them as easily without the RPA helping me. So there's definitely, it's been incredibly helpful for me.
Yeah, I think it's huge that young players just get stuck into as much as possible. You never know what the future is going to hold. You never know, as you say, how long it's going to last. And hearing how proactive you were from the word go makes you sort of, I imagine for Jamie, a PDM's absolute wet dream. But it's like you say, there's many options, but also you never know what could snowball from that first interaction. Jamie, anything you want to add from the gameline program, mate? Anything that you've seen recently from players that's made you think we're heading in the right direction?
I think, like you've said, there seems to have been a bit of a change in terms of lads' willingness to be open to each other about what they're doing outside of it, and then also open with, and it's, I think clubs and people and us in the clubs are also learning more about how we now support lads and understand the demands of them as a player, and also with what courses they're taking on or what experience or linking them up with people that might be suitable to help them in future with areas they're interested in. And I think something which is more accessible now is courses which are a little bit shorter, or the perception that work experience doesn't need to be a month solid of going someone every day. But if you were to spend 1, 2, 3 days a season out meeting people, seeing what things are like, then, like you said earlier, Beef, it's a massive thing to start understanding, actually, I don't ever want to do that again. And it might just point you in a slightly different direction or have a different conversation. And, taking things from this I'd love every player to get as much as they can from the game, whether that's financially, whether that's in terms of courses, education, networking, and just whether they have the most unbelievable career anyone's ever had, or they leave the game after senior academy or whatever it is, but they've got the most that they can out of the game. And I think sometimes you just don't know where things are going to go. And even for someone that never played professionally, if you'd have asked me when I was younger, what do you want to do? Then it's a very hard question to answer. So I think having an understanding that if you typically have got to professional level of rugby, you've put a hell of a lot into it by that point. There's a hell of a lot of a build-up of an identity around that. A lot of your conversations are probably about rugby, how it's going, about injuries, about your next game. If you haven't actually had many conversations about other things or experienced it, it's difficult to answer that question. So it's been good to see lads we're more willing just to go and spend a day or two somewhere and not necessarily going, okay, I need to do this whole 4-year university course, but I can do this. And that's been something that has been really positive, and then has led to them going, actually, I had a chat with this fella and that really interests me. And that's been something that I do hope continues, and you can see it now snowballing between the lads because they'll talk to each other about it, and then that will kind of have a bit of a ripple effect, which has been great.
Brilliant. Well, on that note, I think it's probably a good place for us to wrap this up. Gents, thank you so much for giving up the time and coming to chat with us. Jamie, I mean, I'll see you in a couple of days at the club anyway, mate. So it's not a big goodbye from us. But Joe, thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck with the World Cup preparations. And I hope MyoMaster continues to grow at the rate that it is now. And listeners, thank you very much for listening. You've been listening to The Player's Voice. As always, we do want to hear from you. So if you have any topics, any guests that you'd like to see, just tweet us using hashtag The Player's Voice. But until next time, thanks again for listening. Thank you to our guests and see you later. Cheers. All the best.